Good afternoon and welcome. Today we delve into a profoundly significant and often contentious issue, the restitution of ancestral lands to indigenous peoples. This topic carries immense historical weight, raises critical ethical questions, and has urgent contemporary relevance across the globe. Joining us to explore this complex terrain are two distinguished experts, Kalanikoa Kwamaho, an advocate for indigenous rights who will argue in favor of land return, and Dr. Alistair Finch, a legal scholar who will discuss the challenges and complexities involved. Welcome to you both.
Thank you, Dr. Hayes. It is a privilege to address such a crucial matter. We must begin by acknowledging the profound and enduring historical injustices inflicted upon indigenous peoples worldwide. These injustices are not abstract historical footnotes. They are tangible realities encompassing violent dispossession, the forced severance of spiritual and cultural connections to the land, and the systematic dismantling of our societal structures. The land is not merely a resource to be exploited. For indigenous communities, it is the very bedrock of our existence. It is our library, our pharmacy, our place of worship, and the wellspring of our identity and languages. Therefore, the return of ancestral lands is not a request for charity, nor is it a mere aspiration. It is an assertion of an inherent right, a fundamental tenet of restorative justice, and an imperative under international human rights law. Restitution is about acknowledging sovereignty and facilitating self-determination. It is about empowering indigenous communities to heal from generations of trauma and to rebuild our nations according to our own values and traditions. Beyond moral and legal imperatives, the return of ancestral lands promises tangible positive outcomes. It can lead to the revitalization of our cultures and languages, which are intrinsically linked to specific territories. It can significantly improve the socioeconomic conditions within our communities, allowing us to develop sustainable economies rooted in our traditional ecological knowledge. Furthermore, indigenous stewardship of land often embodies principles of sustainability and environmental protection that are desperately needed in our world today. We have proven to be effective custodians of biodiversity for millennia. The path to genuine reconciliation requires more than apologies. It demands tangible actions that address the root causes of dispossession. The return of ancestral lands is a cornerstone of that process.
Thank you, Dr. Hayes and Mr. Maho, for your impassioned opening. It is crucial to approach this discussion with a clear understanding of the historical context and an unequivocal acknowledgement of the profound grievances held by indigenous peoples. The historical injustices, including forced displacements and the loss of cultural heritage, are undeniable and form a somber chapter in the histories of many nations. There is no question that these wrongs must be addressed. However, while the moral impetus behind calls for land return is clear, translating this into practical, equitable, and legally sound policy in contemporary society presents a labyrinth of significant complexities. We must consider, for instance, the issue of existing third-party property rights. Over generations and often centuries, lands that were once exclusively indigenous territories have been legally acquired and developed by non-indigenous individuals, corporations, and public entities. Unwinding these established rights without creating new waves of injustice and significant socio-economic disruption is an extraordinarily challenging legal and logistical endeavor. How do we balance historical claims with current, legally recognized ownership? Furthermore, the very definition of ancestral claims can be fraught with difficulty. How far back do such claims extend? How are competing or overlapping claims between different indigenous groups, or within them, to be adjudicated fairly? The passage of time, intermarriage, and migration patterns have often blurred traditional territorial boundaries, making the precise delineation required for restitution a complex task. There is also the potential for considerable economic disruption, not only for current occupants but also for broader regional and national economies, depending on the scale and nature of the lands in question. Therefore, while acknowledging the deep sense of loss, we must carefully deliberate the mechanisms and criteria for any form of restitution to ensure they are just, feasible, and do not inadvertently perpetuate new forms of conflict or disadvantage. The pursuit of justice for indigenous peoples must be holistic and multifaceted, exploring a range of solutions that are both meaningful and workable within the intricate fabric of modern states.
Dr. Finch raises valid points about complexity, but complexity should not be wielded as an insurmountable barrier to justice. Legal frameworks are not static. They evolve, and indeed they must evolve to address historical wrongs and uphold human rights. Internationally, there are numerous precedents where states have successfully navigated these complexities. Treaties have been renegotiated, innovative land claim settlement processes have been established, and frameworks like the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples provide clear guidance. For example, the concept of, quote, co-management, or the establishment of indigenous protected and conserved areas, demonstrates that shared jurisdiction and stewardship are viable, even in developed regions. Concerns about economic disruption often overlook the substantial long-term economic benefits that can arise from genuine reconciliation and indigenous economic self-determination. Empowered indigenous communities contribute to national prosperity, bringing unique perspectives on sustainable development. When indigenous peoples have control over their lands and resources, they can develop culturally appropriate economies, reduce dependency, and foster innovation. This is an economic opportunity, not solely a cost. The argument of, quote, creating new injustices often serves to protect existing, often unjustly acquired, privileges. True justice requires a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths and engage in genuine negotiation, utilizing innovative legal tools and a shared commitment to equity, rather than allowing perceived complexity to paralyze progress.
Mr. Maho's points about the adaptability of legal systems and the existence of international precedents are well taken. However, the practical application of these principles remains a significant hurdle in many contexts. The sheer scale of historical land dispossession in some nations, coupled with centuries of subsequent development and population growth, makes the direct physical return of vast tracts of land an exceedingly difficult, if not impossible, proposition, without causing profound societal upheaval. While international declarations provide valuable frameworks, their translation into domestic law and policy that effectively balances all competing rights and interests is where the true challenge lies. The specificity of each national and local context cannot be understated. The scalability and universal applicability of specific precedents are also questionable. What works in one jurisdiction with a particular history and demographic makeup may not be readily transferable to another with vastly different circumstances. Therefore, while land is undeniably central to indigenous identity and claims, a more pragmatic and potentially less divisive approach in many instances might involve a broader spectrum of reparative measures. This could include comprehensive co-management agreements, substantial and fairly negotiated financial settlements that allow for land acquisition on the open market, meaningful resource revenue sharing, the return of culturally significant sites rather than entire territories, and crucially, enhanced political representation and decision-making power for indigenous communities. Such multifaceted solutions, tailored to specific contexts, might offer a more viable path towards reconciliation and empowerment, addressing the core issues of justice and self-determination without leading to intractable conflicts over existing land tenure.
Thank you both. Mr. Maho, how can states practically address competing claims and historical ambiguities in densely populated urban areas, where direct physical return seems exceptionally challenging?
Dr. Hayes, in urban areas, solutions require creativity, focusing on publicly held lands, transferring equivalent parcels, or significant financial restitution for community-led land acquisition. Co-management of public spaces and resources, ensuring indigenous presence and benefit, is also vital, even if full title transfer is complex. Genuine partnership is key.
Thank you. Dr. Finch, if not always direct land return, What mechanisms beyond financial compensation can genuinely empower Indigenous communities and address their profound sense of loss tied to ancestral lands?
Empowerment extends beyond money, Dr. Hayes. Key mechanisms include legal recognition of Indigenous governance, granting jurisdictional authority over community affairs and cultural sites, preferential resource management rights, guaranteed legislative representation, and significant investment in land-based cultural revitalization are crucial for restoring agency and respect.
In closing, I must reiterate that the return of ancestral lands, in meaningful and varied forms, remains fundamental to achieving true reconciliation and securing the future well-being of Indigenous peoples. It is not anachronistic. It is essential. This pursuit is not solely about redressing the grievous wrongs of the past, though that is a critical component. It is profoundly about building a more equitable, just, and sustainable future for all inhabitants of these lands. A future where Indigenous sovereignty and stewardship are recognized as vital. The complexities are real, but they are not excuses for inaction or for the perpetuation of injustice in new forms. We call for genuine, courageous commitment from governments and society at large to engage in meaningful dialogue, to dismantle systemic barriers, and to take tangible action towards land restitution. Our connection to the land is unbroken. Our claim is just. Our hope for a shared future, based on respect and restoration, endures.
To conclude, there is no disagreement on the imperative to acknowledge and address the historical injustices faced by Indigenous peoples. The question is how best to forge a path forward that is both just and sustainable for all members of society. My contention has been that this path requires meticulously considered, legally sound, and socially viable solutions. While the return of land holds deep symbolic and practical importance, we must be prepared to explore a comprehensive spectrum of reparative measures. These measures may complement, or in some complex situations, provide alternative avenues to, the physical return of all claimed ancestral territories. The aim must be genuine empowerment and reconciliation, not the creation of new grievances or societal divisions. Ultimately, fostering national cohesion and ensuring profound respect for the rights and histories of all citizens necessitates solutions that are both principled and pragmatic, healing the wounds of the past while building a stable and equitable future together.
Thank you, Kalinikoa Maho and Dr. Alistair Finch, for your exceptionally insightful and thought-provoking contributions to this vital and indeed complex discussion this afternoon. It is abundantly clear that the issue of returning ancestral lands to Indigenous peoples involves profound historical, ethical, legal, and practical considerations that demand our ongoing attention. We encourage our audience to continue reflecting on the diverse perspectives shared here today. Thank you for joining us.